And then before we jump in, we also wanted to just let people know who this training is for. So this is for grant prospecting. It's totally free, and it's for people who do not or maybe have very little experience in researching grants and funders, want to learn about new tools and strategies for grant prospecting, or haven't taken a training at all. And this training might seem repetitive or feel boring to you if you've taken grant prospecting trainings in the class, or if you have significant experience in grant prospecting yourself. So we just wanted to set the expectations prior to getting started, so everybody kind of knew what we were getting into together. So what is grant prospecting? We're going to go pretty basic here, and then again, we've got an intimate group here, so feel free to stop throughout if you've got questions. We've got time for Q&A at the end of this as well, and we've got some time to practice with the existing RFA too, that Alyssa just mentioned. So, all right, so what is grant prospecting? Is there anybody on the call that might like to define how they think about it? You can put it in the chat. You can come off mute.
I'm thinking it's, oh, go ahead, Deborah.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't know my mic was on. I'm turning it off.
I was thinking it's the right fit. If your organization or if the work that you're doing is the right fit for the RFP. That's what I'm thinking.
Nice. Thanks, Raymond. I see Susanna's building on that in the chat, researching funders that align with your work, finding deadlines, contracts, etc. Do other folks want to build on what Raymond and Susanna have offered here? All right, I think y'all nailed it. So, it's the process to find an opportunity that overlaps with your organization's mission, goals, and funding needs. So it's that research. It's really kind of just thinking about the work that needs to be done. And ideally, you find a grant where it overlaps with all three of those things at the same time. And I know, just honoring kind of this moment where funding has shifted significantly over the last 6 months. And maybe, the mission and the goals of the organization are changing as well as your funding needs. So sometimes this is a moving target and you might get 2 out of 3 within the Venn diagram, if you will. So why do you do it? What are the benefits? I think the first is that you are looking for resources for your fund, right? You want to pay people, you want to be able to do the work. You might have bills to pay for your building, for your rent, et cetera, et cetera. There are some other benefits too, and there's the ability to be able to define and refine your fundraising strategy. So just doing a little bit of that front end work to help focus efforts on the donors who are going to be the most likely to give. So whenever you do that, you might find that network kind of expands so that you can find new potential funders at the same time. So even if you have a conversation with one person who says, we can't really fund you right now, but I might know somebody who can, and that's going to be a win. So it's going to help you define and refine that fundraising strategy. It's going to help you know what your current strategy is too. And that kind of ranges for different organizations. Some folks don't have fundraising strategies, and that could be for a variety of reasons. You might just be getting started. There might have been a big transition in staff recently, but really being able to think about how you've done grant prospecting in the past, how you've tracked that, so track that entire pipeline, can help you understand what the trends have been for your organization, and be able to refine your goals and strategies for the future too. So it's a good way to also create a feedback loop within your organization around your grant prospecting strategy. You can also find corporate giving opportunities. These are maybe not things that folks have always looked into, depending on what sector kind of in space that you're in, what type of work you're doing. But that also opens up the door to additional funds. So I think in New Orleans, we can think of some of those. It could be like Shell, for example. And then also taking on considering individual donors too. So thinking about new pathways related to your grant prospecting. And I know Knopf does Give NOLA Day, right? So that's one opportunity that folks already have that you might be tapped into for finding individual donors. And then types of donors, they're not one size fits all. They're very different. So in terms of thinking about this, we've got this little graphic that's talking about, the further that you go up, on the up axis is more reporting requirements. On the horizontal axis, it's least flexible to most flexible and kind of terms and agreements and what can shift. Individual donors typically, they're going to give you some funds and you can use those at your discretion for the things that you need to, as long as it's in alignment with with laws and regulations, philanthropic. It's a pretty big span. Some funders expect a lot in terms of reporting, and they also might have less flexible requirements. So it might be kind of more written in stone whenever you create your agreement. And then there are other donors that say, hey, we've got these funds for you, really use them how you need to, as long as it's, again, in alignment with local laws and regulations. Corporate donors kind of fit between these. And again, this isn't supposed to be representative of every single funder across the board. I have seen corporate donors that have been really flexible and have, for a year-long grant, only 2 reporting periods, and they're really minimal. And then as you start to get into local, state, and federal government, that's where things become less flexible, more strict. And so when you're doing your grant prospecting, kind of thinking about the requirements that those funders have in terms of reporting and how that fits back within your own systems and processes is also going to support you in thinking about what types of donors you want to look for based on your organizational capacity as well. And then there are also some other things to consider. So one example that we mentioned earlier were corporate donors. Think about your strategic plan and your organizational values whenever you're looking for donors. There might be times where your organization wants to consider funds from a source that isn't aligned with your organization's strategic plan or values, and that's totally valid. So having that be a part of your grant prospecting strategy is critical. There's one example here where they say, we feel that a conservation organization should not accept money from companies whose products are harming the very animals that we are charged with protecting. Conversely, we do want to work with companies that share our focus on solutions to biodiversity and climate crises. So this is a really clear piece of their grant prospecting strategy, and kind of gives them some more information as to who they do and who they don't want to work with, and who they do and do not want to accept funds from. Are there any questions on that front piece before we switch to the next section? Or any thoughts? Like, I know that folks here have probably done this work on their own as well to some degree. Was there anything additive? Okay. So how to do it? I've got a feeling that folks in this room have some experience with this, so I would love to hear the insights and experiences that y'all have to share as well. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's not necessarily a right way. It just depends on what your process is and how you want to stand it up based on your organization's capacity as well as resourcing. There are some key resources in being able to find those grants. One example are databases. There's about 1 million of them. If we go in and click on one of these, we'll just go ahead and click on one just to look at it together. So there's grants.gov. Basically, you open this up and you can search based on so many different opportunities. Sorry, it keeps telling me that I need to restart my computer, so I'm going to ignore that for 4 hours at least. All right. So you can open this up. You can see what's forecasted. You can see what's posted. This is grants.gov again. You can also look at contracts, eligible entities, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on the grants database, you're going to be able to sort and search things to a pretty granular detail. So a part of your grant prospecting strategy is also to just kind of get familiar with the categories of work that you do that might translate back to some of these databases. In the case of green infrastructure, right, if that's the work that you're doing, that might be bucketed under environmental or climate work on some of these, or perhaps other categories as well. A lot of these databases are paid, unfortunately. Um, some of them do have some free options. So Candid, for example, which is, um, that's one that I've used in the past that I've found to be really helpful in finding both grant opportunities as well as aligned donors. They've got a free RFP page that funders post on. It is at the funder's discretion, so it's not comprehensive, but it's a really great place to be able to check out as well. Do folks have any experience in using any of these? And if so, what has your experience been like?
I used to use grants.gov.
That's fair.
I haven't looked at it since the new administration. I
Yeah.
don't think I've used any of the paid ones, but maybe we should. I like to use LinkedIn a lot because it's, I follow the people who work at places I admire or funders, and then they're just constantly posting funding opportunities.
Yeah, and that's a great strategy, Susanna. We've got a whole section that's on a whole section, a slide that's on that social media strategy. I mean, it's huge, and you know those people maybe personally too. So then you might have at least one connection apart from the funder that you're interested in. So Raymond, I see that you're off mute.
Yeah, I've used some of these resources, and I just find them to be well, quite honestly, a waste of time because uh, they have one offering for 2 million people, especially those things that are not as localized. And I work with a very small community, and a lot of people, a lot of these grant makers, they want you to impact 2 million people with $2, and it's just not. I just find that it hasn't been as helpful for me. Maybe somebody else may have found a thing or two, but I haven't found it to be helpful.
I appreciate you sharing that, Raymond. And I think that that's a critical part of your grant prospecting strategy too, is kind of knowing which of the strategies work best just based on the ways that you operate. And I hear you loud and clear. I think funders are asking folks to, in some cases, some funders are asking people to do more with less. I think there's um, a little bit of maybe scarcity just as funding has changed over the last 6 months. Really longer than that, but things are different. People have been pivoting.
I'll just mention one thing here. I don't, it's not on the list, but there is a paid service called Foundation Center. It's particularly focused on, foundation grants, philanthropic grants. And while it is a paid service, the Greater New Orleans Foundation does offer free access to Foundation Center. The catch is that you have to come down to our office to use it, as it's all based on the IP address that you're logging in from. But there's a desk set up on the second floor with a little station that is specifically set aside for folks to access Foundation Center. So come on through anytime during business hours if you would like to get into that database.
Thanks, Dan. Critical piece of information. I'd say take advantage of that for sure if you can.
Do we need to make an appointment or just walk in?
Let me double check on that, Susanna. I'm not usually it was walk-in, but it's been getting popular lately, and so our NLA team, yeah, I think they've started doing appointments. So I will send that back out. I'll try to see if I can figure that out before we finish up here today.
Thanks, Dan. And Deborah asked, where is it? It's at y'all's office off St. Charles, right?
Yeah, our office is right on St. Charles at Harmony Circle. The address is 919 St. Charles. And it's in our office just up on the second floor landing. There's a little desk set up.
Cool. Are there other resources related to databases that people might like to share out for the benefit of other people? All right. If not, I think people might have a bit more to share on this one. the social media aspect in grant prospecting, it's really, shifted pretty significantly, I think, in the last few years, which has been great. It's made opportunities so much more accessible to folks. Just as Susanna had mentioned earlier, follow the funders that you're interested in, and follow accounts that might be tagged as similar. You never kind of know how far that network might take you. Follow LinkedIn profiles too that share out those opportunities. So there's the Greater New Orleans Funders Network, for example. You could follow Dan and Alyssa here if they're on LinkedIn. They might be sharing out things. So just folks that you know that are sharing out critical information. This here is an example where the Greater New Orleans Funders Network posted something from Brian Quinn, who is with Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, that was about an opportunity, right? You can also utilize the search bar on LinkedIn to find opportunities. So, an example of some key terms that you would put in quotes is national community investment. You could do national community green infrastructure, you could do Louisiana. So kind of playing around with the search language and terminology. Another piece that should be mentioned here too is just doing the same thing on Google and adding funder with it and seeing who pops up, and then adding that funder to your LinkedIn. And also there's strategies around using social media to steward potential funders. Make sure that you connect directly with those funders, post about your work, talk about the good work that you're doing. I know everybody here has got to be doing some great work. I definitely recognize some of your names, and I know that you're doing great work, so it's definitely true. So post about your work, offer discussions about your work. So you can also say, hey, I recently made this post. You can share that post directly with the funder you might be interested in talking with. You can say, I think that there might be some alignment around funding, or not funding, but organizational mission and values. Would you be interested in a conversation? Or you can make a really targeted ask and say, hey, I know that you've in the past funded organization X. We're doing similar work. Would you mind giving an introduction between the two of us? So there's a lot of different ways to network, and end up just a little bit closer to those funding opportunities. Are there other pieces that people would like to add here based on your experience in using social media with grant prospecting? I see Raymond's got a hand raised.
I have a question. What kinds of we call it the pound sign. What kinds of hashtags are people using for this nowadays? For these kind of especially this last part.
Yeah, that's a great question, Raymond. You can see Brian uses a couple here. So funding opportunity, research funding, public health. Like if we were doing it for this grant, you could say funding opportunity, hashtag green infrastructure, hashtag New Orleans, hashtag flood mitigation. I think there's so many opportunities, but are there others that folks are using that you've found to be successful? My hashtag game is admittedly very weak, so I'm not going to claim to be an expert. And I would say maybe just check out a couple of posts like this. So go on Greater New Orleans Funders Network and see what types of opportunities they're sharing and what types of hashtags that those folks are using. It seems like Brian might, I do not know Brian, let me be clear, but this individual might know a little bit more about that, and might be a good account to follow to get familiar. All right. So what's next? You've kind of we've talked a little bit about some of these pieces where you can find funders. So once you find a funder, you're going to want to review the organization's mission, look at some of their past grantees for alignment, see if they do similar work to you, see if they have similar mission and values, review the current opportunities for eligibility. So make sure that you are eligible with any opportunities that they have. And then also look and see if you have any mutual or secondary connections on LinkedIn, and reach out with a targeted ask if it makes sense. So that could be specific to the funding opportunity. If that makes sense, it could be, a broader organizational conversation. but just make sure that you're, in particular, I think, looking at eligibility and then that alignment. And then with grant prospecting, sometimes it's kind of chicken or egg. I think it depends on where your organization is in terms of what you're looking for and what you're asking for. So should you create your project first or follow the funding? If your organization is just getting started, you might kind of want to get a sense of what kind of funding is available for the sector of work that you're in. So maybe if your organizational programs and strategies aren't stood up all the way, seeing what kind of resources are out there. I know a lot of folks in this group are doing their work, and this is also a grant where it's really rooted in community needs. So you're going to know what community needs, and I think letting that those needs define your project and then the funding, the funder, is really critical. I know, again, over the last 6 months, things have really changed. I keep saying 6 months. It's already September, so it's 9 months now. But you know, over the last 9 months, there might have been some things within your organization where you're having to pivot as a result of cash flow or other things, right? So that might be looking into the history of your work. So if there's some work that you've done in the past that maybe was on hold because the funding climate was different at that point in time, you can also let that drive your decisions too. But thinking about whether you're creating that project first or if you're following the funding is totally contingent on your organization and the work that you're doing, just as long as it's in alignment with your organization's mission and values. I think those are the two most important things to consider. And then if we were going to lay everything out for an example process for grant prospecting, first you want to identify your funding needs and priorities based on your grant life cycles and strategic plan. Your grant life cycles, that's just kind of, you know, if you've got a year-long grant, when does that grant end? What other money do you have that's in the pipeline? So with grants, we kind of talk about it in terms of a pipeline too. So you might have applied for three different grants. You want to think about the timeline of those and your probability or likelihood of getting those based on the relationship that you have with that funder, or how competitive it is, as well as a couple of other factors. You want to utilize the resources that we've mentioned here to date, as well as others that probably are not mentioned here, to search for those possible donors that are going to fit with what your funding needs and priorities are. You'll need to review for eligibility and just make sure, again, that it matches your funding needs. See if you have any mutual or secondary contacts with staff that might be a part of that funding organization to inquire more about the opportunity. And then, like you're doing today, attend information and technical assistance sessions if available. So I would say that most of you that are here have probably done every single one of these things that has led you to this conversation today. So you're already doing it. And we've got an update from Dan about the Foundation Directly online resource. So people are encouraged to sign up for time slot. You can also stop by, and if nobody's using it, it's all you. So there's some great links in here, including a time slot sign up sheet, as well as a little bit more information on the Foundation Directory online. Dan, did you want to add anything to that?
Nope, you got it. And if you lose this link or whatever it is, if you search our website, this information's on there.
Absolutely. All right, you're going to want to track your efforts too. This goes back to a little bit of the pipeline tracking that I was talking about. A CRM is a customer relation management tool. There are about 1 million that you can use. You can also literally just use an Excel or a Google Sheet. I can open up a quick example that's from this sample from Google Sheets. Zoom out just a little bit. But it's literally just putting in the grant information, the status, if you receive it, the implementation and reporting. So you really just kind of want to track all of these things across so that you can get an idea of where the things are at that you've applied for over time, and then how those projects are also complementary to one another. So in this case, right, this is, you can have an implementation grant here, but you might also have other grants that are funding part of a larger project. So it's might be multiple phases, for example. And all of these links, these are in the doc, in the PowerPoint, and everybody's gonna have access to them. And just a couple of additional tips. And again, this is not totally comprehensive. You know, people spend their entire lives working specifically on grant prospecting, and it's you know, not entire lives, but their whole careers, I should say. But yeah, big tips: retain your existing funders and cultivate that relationship. So it's so much easier to get funding with people who already fund you than trying to build new relationships. Sign up for email communications for any funder group that you are interested in. There are some groups as well, like that maybe don't do funding, but provide links around funding. Introduce yourself to your local community foundation, which y'all have all done this at some point. We're here today, Ganoff is hosting this, so this is great. Ask your current funders who they think should be funding you. They might know some people within their network. Ask your board member, your donors, volunteers about funding opportunities. So, you know, that could also be them supporting your organization in different ways. So sometimes that could look like volunteer time to be able to support you in finding additional funding, or perhaps helping with applications, et cetera, in the case of your board members or volunteers. Invest in community engagement. So local chambers of commerce, other nonprofit organization events, and funder events. Try to attend those if you can and if they are accessible to you. Sometimes those funder events can be kind of pricey, or nonprofit organization events can be pricey. And then make sure that you're doing that marketing as well. So a lot of funders in some cases want to see what the benefit of the work is that you're doing. So if they've made an investment in you, what's going on? How are you doing with that work? Are you sharing it out on LinkedIn? You know, kind of seeing that broader impact. Is there anything that folks feel like is missing before we move on to the next section, or tips, tricks, other items that they might like to share to the benefit of the group?
Yeah, one thought, I stepped away for one moment, but I don't know if you mentioned this, but we went to the Arbor Day convention 3 or 4 years ago, and that was huge for us. Like, we couldn't really afford to go to it before, and we went and met funders, and then a year later we got a $1 million grant. Trump canceled it, but you know, it was just huge for making connections, and so many opportunities have come out of that, and we try to go every year now. So, you know, whatever people's specialty is, I think attending conferences when you can is helpful, and they often have scholarships, which we didn't know about before.
Yeah, it's a great tip, Susanna. You never know who you're going to bump into whenever you're at a conference or an event, and you know, even if they're not the person that's going to fund you, they might be somebody that partners with you on a funding opportunity, and it's just a huge game.
Oh yeah, and like all the action is during lunch and in the evening in the lobby, you know, around the bar. That's where you meet everybody and exchange all the business cards.
Yeah, it's a great tip, Susanna. What else? Are there other things that folks might like to share to the benefit of the group? Okay. Well, we're going to do a little bit of practice. Let me check the chat. Oh, Raymond, sometimes looking for the right conference is difficult because there are so many. Yeah. I hear you. It's overwhelming even just trying to figure out which one's a good fit. All right. So